Hello ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Quinn here again. Today we're going to continue our work on one-step equations. If you've watched part 1 and part 2 of this video series, you would have seen a brief explanation of how we think about and think through one-step equations, an example of addition, an example of subtraction, an example of multiplication. So today we're going to talk a little bit about division, which sometimes when we see an algebraic expression or an algebraic equation, it's going to look a little bit different than what we're used to. So let's take some time, let's think through it, and see if we can't get this figured out. So if you remember, solving one-step equations, you've had some practice, especially if you've watched the first 2 videos, so you should be very familiar with the idea. But let's start with a couple of example problems. We're going to go through 2 today. So, division. This is the big key. It's going to look a little bit different. You could see something that looks like this. Y over 7 equals 9. So you might be saying to yourself, whoa, Mr. Quinn, you said we were going to be talking about division today. This looks like a fraction. Well, if you remember back from other math conversations, whether it was this year or another year, we need to know that this fraction bar means the same thing as y divided by 7. That is exactly the same as this. It's just written a different way. And in the world of algebra, when we start adding those variables in and trying to solve for those unknowns, we're going to end up with problems and equations that look like this more than we are with things that are going to look like this. So let's tackle this problem thinking about our 4 steps that we know. I want you to take a second to think about that first thing that we need to do. What was the first step that we've reviewed on how to solve one-step equations? If you were thinking about splitting our problem through the equal sign, you were correct. So we are going to split through the equal sign. I'm going to do that straight down and through. Now remember, our ultimate goal is to figure out what that pesky variable is equal to. And in order to do that, we need to think of 2 vocabulary terms, and they're going to be step 2 and step 3. The first one, inverse operation. We need to identify what our inverse operation is going to be. If you listened before, we know this means division, so you should be thinking to yourself, what's the opposite of division? And hopefully, in your mind, you're thinking, it's multiplication. So I know I need to use multiplication, and now I'm thinking of my other vocabulary term, which is our 3rd step. That is going to be to isolate the variable, which in this case is going to be the letter y. The only way I can get that y by itself is I need to get rid of my 7. I do that through step 2, which is our inverse operation. So I'm going to be multiplying on both sides, and if your guess that we should be multiplying by 7, you would be absolutely correct. I got to keep that balance. I need it to look the same on both sides of my equation. That's why we split it. So now I'm multiplying by 7. 7, 7, they're going to cancel out, which is going to make my life a lot easier. If I look through all those x's and those crossouts, all I see is that I have a y left. Now I have some simple math to do. 9 times 7, we all know that. We could even check it on our calculator if we needed to. But we know, if we've done that math, it is equal to 63. Once again though, not quite done. Now we're going to need to do step 4. And if you remember from part 2 of this video series, you remember that number 4 means we are going to substitute and check. If you are still struggling with that substitution step, just think about it like if it was a teacher. If your teacher is out sick one day, you're going to have a substitute who's going to come in and replace and do the work that your teacher normally would. Here, we're just substituting in what we think y is equal to. It's going back up into our original problem. 63 is going to go on top of my fraction bar. The 7 is going to remain the same. Now I have 63 divided by 7. I know that equals 9. I know my work is correct. And I know I've solved the one-step equation that involves division. So as promised, we're going to go through one more example. So let's take a look. We're going to stick with the idea of the fraction bar. I'm going to leave my directions up here that we've just talked through. We're going to check them off as we go through this time. The only thing I'm going to do different is I'm going to switch the side that the variable is on. But it doesn't change the kind of math that we need to do. So we're going to say this time that our problem is actually going to be equal to 5. And then we're going to use, I think R sounds like a good letter. R divided by, let's say 15. Let's get something a little more challenging this time. So even though our variable's on the right-hand side, it doesn't change the process. First thing we need to do, split through the equal sign. Boom. Step 1 is done. Now we get to step 2, inverse operation. We know, like we said before, that this means division. Still have my note on the board. The inverse operation of division is multiplication, and I need to get my variable by itself. My ultimate goal is to get that R by itself down at the bottom of my equation. So I'm going to do that by using the inverse operation of multiplication. Both sides of my equation get the multiplication sign, and this time I'm going to be multiplying by 15 because remember, I'm trying to get the R by itself. Times 15 times 15. My 15s on the right hand side are going to cancel out and leave me with just my R. And then I can see here 5 times 15. Even if you don't know what that fact is, there is nothing stopping you from coming over to the side of your paper and doing the math. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 2 is 7. 75. So my variable R is equal to 75. Did step 1, used my inverse operation, isolated my variable. I've now solved. Now I need to substitute and check. 75 is going to plug in to where my R was. 75. 15 is going to remain the same. Now I need to do a little bit of math. 15 into 75. How many times is that going to happen? You could use your calculator. I personally am going to use a little bit of long division just to check my work. 15 goes into 75 5 times. 15 times 5 is 75. I have no remainder. I know my answer is 5. And I also now know that my work is correct. Get my check sign going. And now I'm done. Those are 2 examples of how we can solve one-step equations that involve division. You guys did a great job with that. I hope this video helps you out, and I hope you have a good day.